When I first moved into Oak Hollow Estates, the neighborhood brochure used words like serenity, security, and community. They failed to mention the president of the HOA, Karen Ellsworth, a woman whose smile never reached her eyes and whose clipboard might as well have been a weapon. It was late spring when I bought the house on Sycamore Lane. My wife had died 3 months earlier in a hit and run, and my daughter, Lila, 8 years old and trying to be brave, needed a fresh start. I picked this place for the quiet, for the park nearby, for the promise that maybe we could both breathe again. Karen introduced herself the same day we moved in. She didn't bring cookies or a casserole. She brought a printed copy of the neighborhood guidelines. "I know it's a lot," she said, flipping to page 4 where the fence height regulations were underlined. "But rules are what keep Oak Hollow so lovely. We take pride in our standards here." I nodded politely, too tired to read the fine print, still half unpacked, still half a man. I was a high school science teacher trying to stay afloat between grief and grading. The last thing on my mind was fences. But 3 days later, I received my first violation notice in the mail. Improper placement of garbage cans. It read, typed in 12-point Times New Roman. All bins must be returned to rear storage within 2 hours of collection. Yours remained visible for approximately 2 hours and 43 minutes. The envelope had no return address, but the handwriting on the sticky note said everything. Friendly reminder. K.E. I laughed. It was petty, almost funny. But when I glanced out the window and saw Karen across the street, watching from her porch, I realized she wasn't joking. She was waiting for a response. I didn't give her one. Over the next few weeks, the notices kept coming. Overgrown grass edges. My mower had broken that weekend. Improper mulch color. Mine was natural brown, not the HOA-approved redwood. Unapproved mailbox replacement. The original was cracked, so I'd installed a black one from Home Depot. Each letter was signed with that same chirpy threat disguised as kindness. Friendly reminder. One afternoon, I watched her march down the sidewalk, smartphone in hand, taking pictures of driveways and porch decor like she was a crime scene investigator. That night, I moved our garbage bins the second the truck pulled away. But the next morning, a new notice appeared taped to my door. Late retrieval. Evidence indicates retrieval occurred at 4:23 p.m. HOA standard is 4 p.m. Friendly reminder. This time it wasn't funny. This time I felt it. Something deeper than annoyance. A chill. An intentional intrusion. Still, I said nothing. Instead, I installed a camera facing the front yard. It escalated after that. One Friday evening, I came home from a long parent-teacher conference and found Lila in tears. "She yelled at me," she sobbed, pointing toward Karen's house. "She said I can't draw with chalk on the sidewalk." Chalk. I looked down at the fading pastel shapes. Unicorns, hearts, her name in shaky cursive. Innocent, sweet, and apparently unauthorized street art. I confronted Karen the next day, calm but direct. "She's 8 years old. It's chalk. It washes away." Karen clasped her hands in front of her. "I understand you're still adjusting, Daniel, but property value and uniformity matter. If every child drew whatever they wanted, well, you can imagine." She smiled. I clenched my jaw. Lila lost her mother 3 months ago. This is her way of coping. The smile vanished. "I lost my husband in 2012. That doesn't excuse rule-breaking." And with that, she turned on her heel and walked back inside, as if she had just dropped a bomb and didn't care where the pieces landed. Over dinner, Lila was quiet. I could see her innocence shrinking, her world narrowing under Karen's surveillance. That night, I went online and read the HOA bylaws. Every paragraph, every loophole, every contradiction. I highlighted, made notes, and began building something in my head. Not revenge. Not yet. Just understanding. Knowledge. Because knowledge is control. Karen thought I was a grieving man, too soft to push back. What she didn't know, what she didn't care to learn, was that I was patient. And I was smart. She had no idea what I was about to do. The second wave of attacks wasn't paper. It was people. 2 weeks after the chalk incident, I noticed neighbors behaving differently. warmer on the surface, but colder beneath. The woman across the street, Rachel, who once smiled and waved every morning, started turning her back before I could even nod. One of the dads from Lila's school suddenly stopped responding to my texts about carpooling. It didn't take long to figure out why. A folded pamphlet appeared in my mailbox one morning. No envelope, no address. The title read, "Concerned Citizens of Oak Hollow, Keeping Our Neighborhood Safe and Orderly." My name wasn't in it, but it didn't have to be. There was a section about residents who ignore HOA rules, accompanied by a blurry photo of a black mailbox. Mine. Another page warned against unsupervised minors engaging in public vandalism. Right beside it, pastel chalk marks, faded, labeled visual proof. And near the back, a map of the neighborhood with red dots labeled active complaints. There was only one dot. My house. I stared at the pamphlet for a long time. The paper trembled in my hands. Karen hadn't just declared war. She'd weaponized the neighborhood. I called an emergency meeting with the HOA board. I had to request it through their official channel, which was a Yahoo email account from 2009. They responded 3 days later. Per Article 5, Section C, Subsection 3, a homeowner may speak at an upcoming board meeting with 10 business days notice and a prepared agenda. Please submit your points no later than Thursday. The next meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday. I showed up in a button-down shirt and tie, hair combed, notes prepared. There were 7 board members, including Karen, who sat like a queen at the head of the folding table in the community center. She gave me a saccharine smile as I entered. "Mr. Langford," she said, "thank you for joining us." The meeting began with updates about mulch standards and mailbox uniformity. Then came my segment. "I'd like to ask the board why my home has become the target of repeated, excessive complaints," I said, my voice even, "and why those complaints are being turned into community gossip disguised as safety bulletins." Karen's eyes sparkled, faux concerned. "We simply enforce the standards outlined in the bylaws, Daniel." "Selective enforcement," I said, sliding a stack of photos across the table. "This is Rachel's mailbox, black, identical to mine. This one's Greg's lawn, mowed 4 days ago. You cited mine for waiting 3. And this one is from Karen's own backyard." I flipped to the final photo. It showed a rusty trampoline behind a chain-link fence, visibly violating 3 codes in the community's own handbook. The room went still. One of the board members, a younger guy named Chris, cleared his throat. "Karen, that's your place, right?" Karen didn't flinch. "We're currently addressing it. You've lived there for 12 years. She narrowed her eyes. "What's your point, Mr. Langford?" "My point is that if rules are rules, they apply to everyone. Not just grieving single dads and 8-year-olds with chalk." Karen leaned forward. "You're confusing personal emotion with community standards." I didn't rise to it. Instead, I smiled. Calm. Controlled. "No. I'm calling out hypocrisy. They didn't rule in my favor." "Of course not." Karen controlled 5 of the 7 votes. But I saw it. A shift. Doubt. Chris glanced at me as I left and gave a faint, almost apologetic nod. 2 nights later, someone threw eggs at my house. Lila was asleep. I was reading in bed when the first splatter hit the window. Then another. I ran outside, but whoever did it was already gone. Just shattered shells and dripping yolk across the siding. No one saw anything. No security footage. No witnesses. But Karen knew. She waved at me from her porch the next morning, sipping her coffee like she didn't have a care in the world. I filed a police report. The officer was polite but unconvinced. "We get stuff like this all the time," he said. "Teenagers. Boredom. It happens. Any idea if someone around here has filed complaints or been in dispute with me?" I asked. He gave a vague shrug. "HOAs, man. Power and pettiness." I asked for a copy of the report, printed and signed, because I knew something Karen didn't. Every official complaint I filed, every photo, every record, it was becoming a breadcrumb trail, a trail I intended to follow. The next violation wasn't even a real one. A note arrived accusing me of running a business from home without a permit, suspicious packages being delivered, unknown individuals, seen coming and going. I laughed out loud. I was a teacher. The suspicious package? A microscope I bought online for Lila's science fair. I appealed again, and again it was denied. But then I started keeping a log. Every visit, every violation, every friendly reminder. Dates, times, photographs. I created a folder, printed and digital, backed up on 3 drives and a cloud server. You might think I was being obsessive, but if there's one thing grief teaches you, it's how to focus, how to sit in the quiet and plan. I wasn't planning revenge. Not yet, but I was preparing for it. One night, after another rejection letter from the HOA, I sat down at the kitchen table and stared at the pile of notices. Lila came in wearing her pajamas. "Dad." I smiled gently. "Yeah, baby?" She hesitated. "Can we move?" The question hit me like a knife, but I stayed still. "Not yet," I said, "but we will. One day, after we fix this." She nodded, then wrapped her arms around my waist. "I don't like her," she whispered. "I know," I whispered back. "Me neither." And for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself a single thought. This ends. One way or another. It happened on a Thursday. Lila had just gotten home from school, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her cheeks red from the autumn wind. She came in, tossed her shoes off at the door, and said what she always said, "Hi, Daddy. I'm home." But her voice was off, flat, faint. I glanced up from my laptop. "Everything okay, baby?" She stood there in the hallway, her hands fidgeting with the zipper on her jacket. "Miss Karen came to school today." I felt the air change. My spine stiffened. "What?" Lila looked down. "She said she was there to talk to the counselor. But she pulled me aside on the playground. Said she was worried about me." I stood slowly. "What did she say?" "She asked if I ever felt scared at home. If I had to take care of myself because you were too sad to get out of bed. She said she noticed I was always alone and that sometimes sad daddies forget to take care of their kids." Lila's voice cracked. I'm not alone. You take care of me. You do." Why would she say that? My vision blurred at the edges. I dropped to my knees, took her hands in mine. "You listen to me. You have never, ever been alone. You hear me? You are my world, Lila. Everything I do is for you." She nodded, but I could see the doubt that Karen had planted. A poisonous little seed buried in a child's heart. I drove to the school the next morning. The counselor, Mrs. Patel, greeted me with wide eyes and a nervous smile. "Mr. Langford, I was going to call you." "About Karen Ellsworth?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. She hesitated. "Yes." She presented herself as a concerned neighbor, said she was on the HOA board and felt obligated to report behavioral red flags. I didn't speak, just waited. "She implied you were neglecting Lila. Said she had documentation of unsafe conditions in your home. That you were emotionally unstable." I sat down. My legs didn't trust me anymore. Mrs. Patel leaned forward, hands clasped. "Mr. Langford, I'm required to take every report seriously. But I've seen Lila every week for almost a year. She's bright, polite, happy. She adores you. There's never been a moment where I've questioned her safety." I exhaled, slow and controlled. But inside, I was burning. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room with a legal pad, a cup of black coffee, and rage smoldering under every word I wrote. Karen had crossed the line. She hadn't just harassed me. She had tried to weaponize the one thing she thought I'd kill to protect. She was right. But I wouldn't raise my voice. I wouldn't break windows. I'd break her in court. The next morning, I filed 2 official complaints. One with the police, false report of child endangerment, and another with a lawyer, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Karen had made a fatal misstep. She assumed her gossip and notes and passive-aggressive flyers were immune. She forgot that words, even friendly reminders, can be dangerous when weaponized, especially if they cross into defamation, especially if they're documented. And I had documentation, dozens of notices, copies of the flyers. The pamphlet, the meeting minutes, even video footage of her pacing near our porch, pointing her phone like a lens of judgment. I'd saved everything, dated it, annotated it. My lawyer, Laura Phelps, a no-nonsense former prosecutor, raised an eyebrow as I handed her the evidence. "Jesus," she muttered. "She's made you a case file. And now," I said, "I'd like to make her regret it." But Karen wasn't done. She saw the police car in my driveway a few days later and took it as a declaration of war. Which, in truth, it was. The very next morning, I woke to find my fence line marked with bright orange paint. A notice had been stapled, yes, stapled, directly into the wood. Violation. Unauthorized fence extension. Per section 3.6.2. No fence may be altered or extended beyond its original installation zone without board approval. Your fence appears to cross into HOA-maintained soil by exactly 1.3 feet. Karen had measured, not estimated, measured. This was psychological warfare now. Precision petty. I could see her from across the street, standing at her window, arms crossed, watching, waiting. I didn't respond. I didn't send an email. I didn't call the HOA. Instead, I went quiet. That's what frightened people like Karen the most. Silence. Because silence means planning. Over the next 2 weeks, I filed additional complaints. A formal ethics complaint with the HOA regional chapter. A report to the State Board of Real Estate regarding misuse of influence within a governing association. And a cease and desist letter, hand-delivered to Karen's home via courier. Legal letterhead, copied to every board member. My lawyer filed a discovery motion. We subpoenaed the HOA's communications, internal emails, meeting records, complaint logs. What we found, pure gold. Multiple board members voicing concern about Karen's targeting of my property. One email even said, "Should we cool it with the Langford stuff?" Starting to look personal. Another, sent by Karen herself, said, "That man needs to understand the HOA is not a place for pity. He's unstable. I've seen the signs. Better to intervene before something tragic happens." We printed it, framed it. It would hang in her deposition. Then came the letter, typed, embossed with an HOA logo, slid under my door in the middle of the night. Karen's handwriting scrawled across the bottom. "This ends now. You can't win." She was wrong, because I already had. Started small. A single car parked across from Karen's house. Inside, a man in business casual held a clipboard and wore a badge from the State Office of Homeowners Association's oversight. He was there to conduct a surprise audit. Karen never saw it coming. Neither did the rest of the board. By that point, the letter Daniel's lawyer had sent, complete with attachments, violations, and legal threats, had caused enough internal panic that 2 board members had resigned. One of them, Chris, the youngest on the board, had reached out directly. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have spoken up earlier. She's scared of losing control." I said nothing at first. Then slowly I smiled. "She's already lost it." The audit turned up a series of irregularities. Board decisions made without a full quorum. Karen using her personal email for official HOA business. Fines issued that didn't follow due process. A misuse of discretionary funds for community beautification that conveniently involved a landscaper her cousin owned. The state investigator didn't say much at first, but his visits became more frequent. Soon, other homeowners began asking questions. And just like that, Karen's perfect facade started to crack. The true shift happened during the Fall General Assembly. It was a required meeting, all homeowners invited, held in the community center's echo-filled hall, with cheap coffee, folding chairs, and an ancient PA system. Karen took the stage, clipboard in hand, lips pursed. You could tell she still believed she could control the room. "Before we begin," she said, "I'd like to remind everyone that this is a formal meeting. No outbursts or inappropriate disruptions will be tolerated." Then she turned to me. "I understand Mr. Langford has asked to speak." All eyes shifted toward me. I stood, wore a suit. Not flashy, just clean, quiet, businesslike, professional. I walked up, took the mic, and unfolded a single piece of paper. Over the last few months, I began. I've been the recipient of over 17 formal HOA complaints. Not because of legitimate violations, but because one individual on this board decided I didn't belong here. A ripple of murmurs. Some of you received flyers. Some of you may have heard things. Most of it, let's be honest, was designed to isolate me, to shame me, to make me and my daughter feel unsafe in our own home. Karen opened her mouth. I raised a hand politely. I have not responded with hostility. I have not retaliated. But I have documented everything. I held up a folder. Emails, photos, meeting transcripts, videos, and most notably this. I held up the letter Karen had written. The one with her handwritten note. This ends now. You can't win. That, I said calmly, is what someone writes when they're afraid of being exposed. A gasp. A few audible whispers. Karen's face turned a shade paler. I smiled, just enough to unsettle her. I'm here to say that I do belong. And more importantly, so does every other resident here who's been too afraid to speak up. Who's faced fines without hearings, accusations without evidence, or intimidation under the guise of standards. I paused. I filed a lawsuit, and regardless of the outcome, everything I've uncovered will be made public record, including financial discrepancies and personal conflicts of interest. By the time I stepped down, the room had changed. Not everyone applauded, but enough of them stared at Karen like they were seeing her for the first time. Not as a protector of property values, but as a petty tyrant exposed under fluorescence and truth. Karen tried to recover. These are serious accusations, she said into the mic, and I assure you, the board has always acted with transparency and someone stood up in the back. Rachel, my once frosty neighbor. Then why did you tell me Daniel was under investigation for child neglect? She asked, loudly. Karen froze. The room fell silent. Because I talked to his daughter, Rachel continued, and she's one of the brightest, sweetest kids I've ever met. And if you lied about that, what else have you lied about? Karen's mouth opened, closed. Then someone else stood. Greg, the guy who'd once raked his lawn in HOA-approved stripes. I got fined last year for having a garden hose visible, he said. Karen, you had Christmas lights up until March. How come no one fined you? More voices. More murmurs. The meeting ended in chaos. Not with shouting. With Karen walking out, clutching her clipboard like a shield that no longer worked. A week later, a special election was held. Karen didn't run for re-election. She didn't even show up. Chris was voted in as interim president. The fines against me? Reversed. The records? Expunged. A public apology, signed by the board, was posted on the HOA's website. Karen put her house on the market. The morning she left, I stood on my porch with a coffee in hand. She looked over from her front lawn, saw me, and stopped. There was no glare, no smug smile, just a defeated stillness. I nodded once. She got in her car and drove away. And that was it. No screaming, no final insult. Just the quiet end of a reign built on fear and rules bent to fit one woman's need for control. Lila stood beside me. Is she gone? I nodded. Good, she said. Can we draw on the sidewalk again? I smiled. We can draw wherever we want. 3 months had passed since Karen left Oak Hollow. Her house sold quickly, though at a noticeable discount. I heard whispers that the new buyer asked for a steep reduction after pulling the HOA records and seeing her name pop up in multiple filed complaints. Reputation, as it turns out, sticks, especially when it's stapled to an audit report. The new homeowner? A retired Navy captain and his husband. They brought cookies the first week. Real ones, with a handwritten note that read, "Thanks for keeping this neighborhood sane. Funny how simple kindness feels revolutionary after you've lived under a slow-burn dictatorship." Lila adjusted faster than I expected. Kids do sometimes when they're given room to breathe. Her drawings returned to the sidewalk in chalked rainbows and animals with big googly eyes. She made a friend 2 doors down, a girl named Hannah, whose parents used to keep their distance. They invited us for dinner one night. We never knew what was real, Hannah's mom confessed. Over meatloaf and lemonade. Karen made it sound like you were dangerous. I didn't defend myself. I didn't need to. The truth was sitting right beside me, eating mashed potatoes and giggling about slime recipes. One Saturday, I opened the storage closet and looked at the box I'd labeled Karen HOA Hell. Inside were all the notices, the photos, the audio files, the signed cease and desist. The response from the State Oversight Office declaring Karen's conduct a breach of procedural ethics and board integrity. Even the pamphlet with the red dot on my home. I considered burning it. Then I closed the lid and slid it onto a high shelf. Not to erase it, to remember, to know that quiet strength can leave a scar too, but in the shape of a boundary. 2 weeks later, I received a letter from the HOA. A different kind of letter. It was a request. The board had decided to implement a homeowner advisory committee. Volunteers who'd help monitor board decisions, keep power in check, and give feedback from a resident's perspective. They asked me to chair it. First, I said no. Why step back into the fire? But then I thought about it. About how systems don't fix themselves. How silence enables louder bullies to step in. About how maybe, just maybe, someone needed to stand up for the next single parent or young couple or immigrant family that moved in and didn't know the rules, or how they were sometimes bent like knives. So I said yes. With conditions. No meetings before 10 a.m. No more friendly reminders. Everything must be filed with real names, dates, documentation. And absolutely under no circumstances would there ever again be a rule about chalk. They agreed. The first meeting was held in the community center, same as before, but it felt different, lighter. People actually showed up. A young woman named Pilar, who had moved in last month, raised her hand to ask a question about garden fencing. There was no judgment, just discussion. We even laughed. At one point, someone brought up the Karen era, and the room collectively winced and chuckled. Remember the garbage can timestamps? Chris said. She'd sit in her car and time you. I caught her with a stopwatch once. The room roared with laughter, including me. It was the kind of shared memory that used to sting, but now felt like a battle scar worn proudly. Later that night, I stood in my garage, turning off the light. Lila's bike leaned near the wall, its little pink basket filled with leaves she had rescued from the backyard. I thought about Karen, how she'd once tried to report me for suspicious behavior when I sat outside in the dark too long. She never once asked what I was doing. What I was doing was grieving, breathing, surviving. What I was doing was not breaking. There's something satisfying about winning without shouting, about enduring just long enough for the bullies to crumble under the weight of their own ego. But more than that, there's peace in knowing you didn't become them to defeat them. Karen's gone. The neighborhood is healing. My daughter is smiling again. And I sleep through the night now. Epilogue. 6 months later, I received a card in the mail. No return address. Inside was a simple message. I overstepped. I see that now. I hope you'll find some peace knowing your daughter lives in a better place than I did. K. I didn't frame it, but I kept it. Some scars speak. Some stories end with silence. Others end with a card and the soft sound of a truth finally admitted. I tucked it behind the folder in the box, closed the lid, went inside, and sat on the porch with Lila, a pack of chalk between us, and nothing left to fear.